They told me the old farmhouse was worthless when they kicked me out of the family estate, laughing as I drove away with just a suitcase and the deed to my grandfather's junk property. 3 days later, while trying to clear brush from the overgrown yard, the ground collapsed beneath me, revealing a steel hatch that would uncover not just a forgotten Cold War bunker, but the dark conspiracy behind my family's fortune. The reading of my father's will felt more like an execution than a family gathering. I sat stiffly in the mahogany-paneled law office, still wearing the black dress from his funeral, as my stepmother Victoria observed me with the clinical detachment of someone studying an insect. My stepbrother James didn't even try to hide his smirk. And to my daughter Eliza, the lawyer read, adjusting his glasses, "I leave the old Harper property in Millfield County." The silence that followed was broken by Victoria's practiced sigh. "Well, that's something, I suppose." "A worthless something," James added, not bothering to lower his voice. "Dad told me once it would cost more to demolish that dump than the land is worth." I felt my face flush with heat. Just weeks ago, I'd been working in my father's investment firm, with a corner office and a promising future. Then came my sudden termination, coincidentally right after I'd questioned some unusual account transfers that James had authorized. Now my father was dead from an unexpected heart attack at 62, and I was being handed a deed to a property I'd never even heard of. "What about my position at the company?" I asked quietly. Victoria's smile was like a knife. "The board has already voted on a restructuring. James will be taking over your father's role as CEO. Your department, unfortunately, has been eliminated." Just like that, I was erased. 29 years old, suddenly unemployed, with no severance and a reputation in the industry that James had somehow managed to poison overnight. All I had was a savings account that wouldn't last 3 months and a deed to a property that even the lawyer was avoiding eye contact about. "Your grandfather acquired it in the 1960s, the lawyer explained apologetically as I signed the paperwork. "I believe it's been vacant for decades. Why would Dad keep a worthless property all these years?" I asked. Victoria's perfectly manicured nails tapped against the polished table. "Harold was sentimental about strange things. A character flaw I tried to help him overcome." As I reached the door, James called after me. "Don't forget what your father always said, Eliza. The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see. Maybe you'll find a rusted tractor you can sell for scrap." 2 days later, I pulled up to the Harper property in my 10-year-old Honda, which now contained everything I owned. The 3-hour drive from the city had taken me through increasingly rural landscapes until finally, a rusted mailbox marked a narrow dirt road leading into dense woods. The late October rain had turned the unpaved driveway into a muddy obstacle course that my car barely survived. What awaited me at the end was exactly as advertised: worthless. A 2-story farmhouse stood in a small clearing, its white paint long since weathered to a patchy gray. The porch sagged dangerously on one side, several windows were boarded up, and the roof had clearly surrendered to multiple leaks. The surrounding 5 acres were a tangle of overgrown bushes, fallen trees, and what might have once been a garden, now reclaimed by nature. I sat in my car, rain drumming on the roof, and fought back tears. My phone showed no service bars. My bank account showed less than $4,000. And the property I now owned looked like it belonged in a horror movie about rural isolation. "The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see," I whispered mockingly, repeating my father's favorite phrase. That first night, I slept in my car. The house's interior was even worse than its exterior. Dust-covered furniture draped in yellowed sheets, water damage on most walls, and a pervasive smell of mildew. I'd need to assess the electrical and plumbing systems before I could even consider staying inside. Morning brought marginal improvement. The rain had stopped, and in daylight, I could at least see what I was dealing with. I spent hours clearing debris from the porch and forcing open windows to air out the musty rooms. By afternoon, I'd made one corner of the living room habitable enough for a camping mattress and battery-powered lantern. My exploration of the property revealed little of value. The barn was structurally unsound, and the tool shed contained only rusted equipment. I found an old well that might still function and made a mental note to test the water. The house itself was furnished with pieces too damaged or outdated to sell, though a few might be salvageable with work. In town, 5 miles down the main road, I discovered why Victoria had been so quick to dismiss the property. Millfield was barely a town anymore, just a gas station, a small grocery, a hardware store, and a diner. The locals eyed me with undisguised suspicion when I introduced myself as Harold Harper's daughter. "Harper?" the hardware store owner repeated, studying me carefully. "You related to old man Edgar Harper?" "He would have been my grandfather," I said, surprised anyone remembered. The man's expression closed off immediately. Haven't heard that name in years. Similar reactions followed me through town. At the diner, the elderly waitress nearly dropped my coffee when I mentioned my inheritance. That old Harper place should have been torn down decades ago, she muttered. Nothing good ever came from there. By the end of my first week, I had managed to get the water running, though it came out brown and smelling of iron. The electricity worked in parts of the house, enough to power a small space heater and a lamp. I'd cleared enough brush to create a walking path around the property and had begun to catalog what repairs were most urgent before winter set in. My money was disappearing faster than anticipated. The hardware store didn't extend credit to newcomers, especially not Harper's it seemed, and every repair revealed 3 more problems beneath it. I was considering listing the property for whatever I could get when the knock came at my door. He was tall, probably mid-40s, with the weathered look of someone who worked outdoors. "Name's Mike Donovan," he said without preamble. "I do contracting work in the area. Heard someone had moved into the old Harper place." I introduced myself warily. "Harper." His eyebrows rose. "You Edgar's granddaughter?" "Yes." "Did you know him?" Mike shook his head. "Before my time. But my dad worked for him briefly in the 60s. Said he was an odd duck, kept to himself mostly." He glanced past me at the house's interior. "Place is in rough shape. You planning to flip it or stay?" "I haven't decided," I admitted. "Depends on how much work it needs." Mike nodded thoughtfully. "I could take a look, give you an estimate. No charge for the assessment." I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. I couldn't afford to hire help, but I could at least learn what I was facing. As Mike inspected the house, pointing out structural issues and repair priorities, I found myself asking, "Did your father ever mention why my grandfather bought this place? It seems so isolated." That was the point, I think. "Your grandfather worked for the government? Some kind of engineer?" Dad said he was paranoid about nuclear war like a lot of folks back then. Mike tapped a wall, listening to the hollow sound. Cold War jitters had everyone building fallout shelters and stocking supplies. A fallout shelter? Here? Wouldn't surprise me. Lot of rural properties in this area had them. He moved to the kitchen, testing floorboards with his foot. Though if there is one, it might be collapsed by now. These old bunkers weren't always built to last. The idea of a bunker triggered something in my memory, my father mentioning once that his childhood home had a special hiding place during storms. I'd assumed he meant a basement or cellar, but the house didn't have one. At least not one I'd found. The next morning, armed with this new perspective, I began a systematic search of the property. The house revealed nothing but damaged drywall and rotting floorboards. The barn was a dead end as well, its foundation too unstable to hide anything. It was in the overgrown side yard, while clearing brush to create a drainage pathway away from the house, that the ground suddenly gave way beneath me. One moment I was hacking at stubborn vines, the next I was thigh-deep in a muddy hole, the earth having collapsed into some void below. After extracting myself, I began carefully clearing away more soil, revealing what appeared to be a rusted metal hatch partially covered by decades of accumulated soil and plant growth. Heart pounding, I used a pry bar from the shed to lever it open. The hinges screamed in protest but eventually yielded, revealing a narrow concrete staircase descending into darkness. The air that rushed up was stale but dry, carrying a metallic tang that made my skin prickle. "The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see," I whispered, my father's words suddenly taking on new meaning. I returned to the house for my flashlight and a makeshift mask, then descended the stairs cautiously. 15 steps down, the narrow passage opened into a rectangular chamber approximately 15 feet square. The beam of my flashlight revealed walls lined with metal shelving, much of it still stocked with ancient supplies, canned goods with faded labels, water containers, first aid kits, and other survival necessities. A small desk sat against one wall with what looked like radio equipment, all covered in decades of dust. This was no simple fallout shelter. The construction was too elaborate, the equipment too specialized. One wall was lined with metal filing cabinets, their surfaces coated with rust but their contents potentially intact. I tried one drawer, finding it locked. They all were, each with a small keyed lock that had survived the years better than the cabinet's exterior. I spent hours exploring the bunker, cataloging its contents, marveling at the unexpected discovery. Here was something of value, perhaps not monetary but historically significant. Maybe I could turn the property into a Cold War museum or historical site. It was the first hopeful thought I'd had since inheriting the place. When I finally emerged, the afternoon sun momentarily blinding me, I found Mike's truck parked beside my car. Found something interesting? He asked, eyeing my dirt-covered clothes. I hesitated, then decided to trust him. A bunker. Cold War era looks like. Fully stocked with some kind of communications equipment. Mike's expression shifted subtly. Mind if I take a look? Together we descended into the bunker, Mike examining the construction with professional interest. This isn't standard civilian construction, he noted, running a hand along the reinforced walls. Government grade. Your grandfather must have had serious connections. Or serious fears, I suggested. Maybe both. Mike pointed to the filing cabinets. What's in those? They're locked. No key that I could find. Mike studied them thoughtfully. I know someone who might be able to help with that. Old friend works in locksmithing, specializes in antiques. I can give him a call if you want. I agreed, and 3 days later, Mike returned with his friend Dale, who made quick work of the cabinet locks. What we found inside changed everything. The files contained classified government documents, reports, photographs, correspondence, all related to something called Project Luminous. The details were technical, but the implications clear. In the early 1960s, the government had conducted experiments with a new type of radiation in several rural locations, including Millfield County. My grandfather, Dr. Edgar Harper, had been one of the project scientists. More disturbing were the medical files, records of local residents who had experienced unexplained illnesses, birth defects, and cancer clusters in the decades that followed. My grandfather had compiled evidence showing a direct correlation between these health issues and exposure to the experimental radiation. Evidence that had never been made public. This is why everyone in town reacts to the Harper name, I murmured, piecing it together. They blame my grandfather for what happened here. But according to these, Mike said, holding up a folder of correspondence, he was the whistleblower. He tried to get the government to acknowledge the damage and compensate the victims. The final drawer contained the most shocking revelation. Recent files, some dated just months before my father's death. He had known about the bunker all along, had been continuing my grandfather's work, gathering evidence against a pharmaceutical company called Meridian Biosciences. A company that, according to the documents, had acquired the government's experimental research and continued it secretly under the guise of agricultural testing. A company where my stepbrother James had worked before joining my father's firm 5 years ago. A company my father had been preparing to expose, according to his notes, with evidence of corporate espionage, illegal human testing, and deliberate contamination of groundwater. The last entry in my father's journal was dated 3 weeks before his death. James discovered the backup files. Confrontation inevitable. If anything happens to me, everything is at the farm. The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see. My hands trembled as I closed the journal. They killed him, I whispered. Victoria and James, they killed my father to protect Meridian's secrets. Mike's expression was grim. These are serious accusations, Eliza. Do you have proof? Not of murder, not yet. But these documents prove everything else. I gestured at the files. My father was building a case against Meridian, and against James for stealing proprietary information from my father's firm to benefit Meridian. That's why I was fired. I was getting too close to the money trail. That night I couldn't sleep. The revelations swirled in my mind, pieces clicking into horrible place. My father hadn't left me a worthless property. He'd left me the truth, hidden where Victoria and James would never think to look. Now I had to figure out what to do with it. The answer came the next morning in the form of a black SUV with government plates parked at the end of my driveway. 2 men in suits approached the house, introducing themselves as agents from the Environmental Protection Agency's Criminal Investigation Division. We're looking for Eliza Harper, one said, showing his credentials. That's me, I replied cautiously. We'd like to ask you some questions about Meridian Biosciences and your father, Harold Harper. For a moment, panic gripped me. Were they here to silence me, to confiscate the evidence? But their next words dispelled that fear. Your father contacted our office shortly before his death, regarding potential violations of the Clean Water Act and improper disposal of hazardous materials. He mentioned having documentation but died before our scheduled meeting. We've been trying to locate those files ever since. Relief washed over me. I have them, I said. All of them. And more. I showed the agents the bunker and the files, explaining my discoveries and my suspicions about my father's death. They listened with increasing interest, taking notes and occasionally exchanging glances. This is significantly more than we expected, the lead agent admitted. Enough for multiple federal investigations. We'll need to take these documents into evidence and get formal statements from you. And what about my father's death? I pressed. If there's evidence of foul play, that would fall under FBI jurisdiction. We can make that referral based on what we're seeing here. For the next week, I worked with various federal agents, providing statements, identifying documents, and helping them understand the connections my father had uncovered. The property became a hub of activity, with evidence being carefully cataloged and removed. Mike proved invaluable, using his local connections to help identify affected families and potential witnesses to Meridian's activities in the area. Then came the text message from a number I didn't recognize. They know. Get out now. Minutes later my phone rang. It was James. Eliza, darling sister, he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. I've been trying to reach you. Victoria and I feel terrible about how things ended. We'd like to make amends. Really? I kept my voice neutral, giving nothing away. Absolutely. In fact, we'd like to buy that property from you. Fair market value plus a generous bonus. Say $500,000? You could start fresh somewhere nice. That's quite a change of heart, considering you called it worthless a few weeks ago. James laughed lightly. I may have spoken hastily. Family land has sentimental value after all. We should keep it in the Harper name. I'll think about it, I said, knowing full well what had prompted this sudden interest. Don't think too long. We'll be in the area tomorrow afternoon. We can handle everything then, papers, payment, all of it. After hanging up, I immediately called the EPA agent I'd been working with, relaying the conversation and my concerns. They're coming here tomorrow, I finished. They know something. Our team won't be back until Thursday, the agent said. Can you stall them? I don't think that's wise. James wouldn't make this move unless he was. Loss had transformed into purpose and justice. The worthless inheritance had revealed the most valuable treasure of all, the truth that would finally bring healing to a community and honor to my family's name. If you found this story of hidden truth and justice moving, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful tales of family secrets and unexpected discoveries. Share with someone who appreciates a good story about justice served, and leave a comment telling us what you think was hidden in the bunker all along. Desperate. A brief silence, then, we have enough to move on Meridian, but the investigation into your father's death is still developing. If you could get James to incriminate himself somehow. You want me to wear a wire? Not exactly. But if you could record the conversation legally, most states allow one-party consent recording. I thought of my father's journal, his meticulous documentation, his final message. I'll handle it, I said. But I need someone nearby just in case. The next afternoon, storm clouds gathered as I watched Victoria's luxury SUV navigate the muddy driveway. I'd spent the night preparing, hiding copies of key documents in places they would never find, setting up recording devices throughout the house, and creating a secure cloud backup of everything. Mike was parked down the road, ready to intervene if necessary, while plainclothes agents maintained discreet surveillance from a distance. Victoria emerged first, her designer boots immediately sinking into the mud. Her disgust was poorly concealed beneath a practiced smile. James followed, carrying a briefcase, his expression coolly confident. Eliza, darling, Victoria air-kissed near my cheek. This is rustic. It's home now, I replied, leading them inside to the living room, the only part of the house I'd made presentably comfortable. James wasted no time, opening his briefcase to reveal documents and a cashier's check. We can wrap this up quickly. I have the transfer papers ready, just sign here and the money is yours. I made a show of examining the papers. $500,000 for a worthless property? What changed your mind, James? As I said, sentimental value. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Dad would have wanted us to keep it in the family. Thunder rumbled outside as rain began pelting the windows. I set the papers down. Before I sign anything, I'd like to understand why this place matters so much to you now. Victoria's smile tightened. Does it matter? We're offering you a fresh start, Eliza. Generous terms, no questions asked. Actually, I have several questions. I met James's gaze directly. Like why you stole research from Meridian while working there. Or why you had me fired when I started noticing the strange transfers in our company accounts. Or why Dad suddenly died of a heart attack after confronting you about it. The color drained from James's face. What are you talking about? Project Luminous, I said quietly. Meridian's illegal continuation of those experiments. The contamination of local water sources. Dad's evidence against you. I know everything, James. Victoria stood abruptly. This is absurd. We came here in good faith. You came here because you realized what Dad really left me. I stood as well. Not a worthless property but the truth. The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see. That's what he always said. Now I understand what he meant. James's polished facade cracked. Whatever you think you know, you can't prove anything. The bunker files say otherwise. His eyes widened. What bunker? The one where Dad kept copies of everything, including his journal documenting your threats when he discovered what you were doing. Victoria's hand clamped on James's arm as he took a step toward me. We're leaving. Keep your worthless property. It's too late for that, I said calmly. Federal agents have everything. The EPA, the FBI, probably more agencies by now. Dad made sure the truth wouldn't die with him. James lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my throat with shocking strength. Where are the files? He hissed, his composed mask completely gone. Tell me now. I clawed at his hands, gasping for breath as Victoria urged, James, stop. Not here. It's already done, I managed to choke out. Even if you kill me, everyone will know what you did to Dad. What you've been hiding for Meridian. The front door crashed open. Mike burst in, followed by the federal agents who had been watching the house. In seconds, James was pulled off me and forced to the ground, while Victoria stood frozen, her perfect composure finally shattered. James Harrington, Victoria Harrington, one agent announced, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and pending charges of homicide. You have the right to remain silent. As they were led away in handcuffs, the rain still pouring outside, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My father's voice seemed to whisper through the old house. The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see. 6 months later, I stood on the newly repaired porch of the farmhouse, watching as workers installed the final memorial plaque. The property had been transformed, not into a home for me but into a research and treatment center for victims of environmental contamination. The federal settlement from Meridian Biosciences had provided more than enough funding, with additional compensation for affected families in the region. The bunker remained, preserved as both evidence and historical record, a testament to my grandfather's and father's determination to expose the truth. My father's company had been returned to my control after James's conviction for fraud and corporate espionage. The murder investigation was ongoing, but the evidence was mounting. Mike approached, carrying coffee mugs for both of us. In the months since our discovery, he had become more than an ally, a friend, and perhaps something more. Memorial looks good, he said, handing me a steaming mug. Dad would have approved, I replied. And Grandpa too, I think. Your family's legacy restored at last. I smiled, looking out over the property that had seemed so worthless at first glance. The best treasures are the ones nobody else can see, I said softly. Dad was right about that. As the autumn leaves fell around us, I felt at peace for the first time since that terrible day in the lawyer's office. What had begun with betrayal and